lead to people simply turning off and being apathetic and not wanting to respond. They may make a choice to turn away, and they may decide they don't wish to know about certain things, and that may frustrate people because it means that the image cannot compel them to act in a particular way, but it doesn't leave them numb. It doesn't leave them completely without demonstrably ill-placed as a critique, but it's a very conventional and a very common critique. Yeah, empirically, you could see, which we might regard as problematic, and we might wish they led to different views and different understandings, but doesn't lead to people just sort of feeling hopeless in the face of it. One is that precisely through the notion of advocacy, charitable organisations continue to rely on visual strategies to increase their presence and to raise money. And the very substantial sums of money that come in relationship, say, to the tsunami in Boston before, is itself a demonstration actually of how a huge number of images actually has a powerful response, and I think questions that notion of compassion fatigue. Now, the issue of whether the sorts of images that are circulated that are having this effect and are raising money are the sorts of images that we wish it becomes increasingly difficult to get stories placed that are dealing with social documentary, political issues in a highly critical way that contextualise. So I agree with entirely, and that is, she talked about the function of photographs. But actually, most understanding of images is about the meaning of images, or the truth of images, and debate about them is kind of stuck on those points, really. And you get very similar rhetorics repeated continually, and they just don't get us very far. And it would be much better to focus on the effect of images, the function of images, and the work of images as a way of framing
very long-term investigative work, and it has a completely different character to it at work than the brilliant
kind of the styles and themes and so on of that mass of images that is circulating. And I think the question about the single image and what we expect of the single image, etc. But there's something about, culturally, there's something about the way we've thought about photography and the single image that we have invested it with such possibility or hoped for such to expect that.
Do you think it's because people look back at certain iconic images that they felt changed, let's say images from the Vietnam War that changed the situation, or Abu Ghraib, and they are they're putting too much in the power of the one single image to shift
in a particular way. And I'm also very skeptical about whether the ones that we pick out, and it is a standard 6 or 7 in the Western world, that are repeated all the time in the photography textbooks, all the time in the articles, all the time in the discussion. I was personally affected by that image, and I've heard plenty of people say that when they were about those images during the Vietnam War period. I don't know of any argument that actually demonstrates that Nick Wood's photograph demonstrably furthered the peace movement and the anti-war movement in Vietnam. Now, I don't regard this as a failure of that image, but I regard it as something that, an interpretation that we've placed on the image that is too burdensome for it, and therefore we accept contemporary images to stop wars and change things.
It's the beginning, and the photographer, I think, goes there because they feel passionately about it.
Stunning. And also, if you could bring in the issue of media saturation and compassion fatigue and all. It's not simply those issues.
A question about either things are visible or invisible. It's a question about how things are visible.
Witnessing, which I think you seem to be suggesting. I think there are just so many examples in the last 2 months. I've been in Syria and Egypt, and in both cases suggest the suggestion that Serbia somehow works as a right example here. Ethnic cleansing troops should be proud of themselves waving the camera to bring attention to these things.
You profoundly misunderstand this to the point.
That's the example that you use. Just to go back to Syria and Egypt, if you walk in countries with autocratic heads of state, I'm sure.
I've been to a sufficient number of award ceremonies and festivals. Actually, it's limits, and understand that it doesn't lead and doesn't produce the change you want. The reason why I use the Serbian example is not to say that therefore all states or all, because many of these injustices are taking place knowingly in front of the camera. And yes, there are controls, just like
Things are much more basic. How do you take pictures and record images in a situation of overt or indirect censorship? And how do you get them published to affect images? And as an editor, I've always used the power of images to actually bypass controls. I use the editorial content or editorializing capacity of photographs to get around what you can't say in text. Somewhat like cartoons do. But then, because the power of the image is so powerful, so gripping, it actually is counterproductive because you then get...
I didn't catch the name on that, I'm afraid. And the non-dissimilar developments are taking place in the UK with regard to the police preventing photographers taking photographs in public places. This is rising to the top of the agenda in the UK. And I say the top, but it's getting much higher on the agenda than you would expect. After those photographs have been taken. And there, at least in Europe at the moment, there's very little restriction on the photograph.
about our controls. I mean, no one is suggesting that these are not live issues and significant issues, either for the individual photographers involved or for what we do or do not get to see as a result of that. But
we'd like to explore a little more with this little experiment that we've done in the past 2 years. I think there's a lot more potential for it.
We were going to have a short break before the video conference, but we don't have time, so we're going to move straight into it. So if I could ask the technical team to set that up as soon as possible. I'll invite Mahasweta Devi to come on stage. Has sadly been hospitalized today, so he's not able to be with us, but he does send us his greetings and his feelings of solidarity. We of course have Mahasweta Devi herself here, who has, particularly her novels and her work on the Devada movement, is very significant. We're told that no one's on his way there, but there too we have going. Could you tell us the URL that people need to look into to see this as well?
The URL. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Pranati, who are working here.
Yeah. The other people there's Terrell here, who's played a tremendous role behind the scenes in getting it all to work. He's one of the people I forgot to thank earlier on, so I'm sure I'll be embarrassed a few more times as we go.
আমি বাংলায় সবটা বলবো না, কারণ যারা বাংলা বুঝেন না সেরকম লোকরাও আছেন। মুক্তি, আমার কাছে মুক্তি শব্দটা অনেক।
We're delighted to have you with us. It's a huge privilege to have yourself and Mahasweta Devi together. I must admit that there is the third person who was meant to be with us, Stuart Hall. He wrote today to say he had to be hospitalized very suddenly and he sincerely regrets not being able to be with us. So we will have the two of you. The current situation in the globe today, speaking across the two continents, Mahasweta Devi as an activist for so many years, you as a linguist, who've engaged not only...
I'm not sure my own experience with these, in fact, is as an activist involved in problems of trying to gain, protect, and expand freedom in the United States and in many parts of the world. And I don't think there's anything in this book, Wealth of Nations, in which he extols the wonders of the division of labor, of the baker, the Swiss king, and the farmer.
Why not? Actually, I don't think I will be able to help this session very much, because you told me to talk, I should talk about my activism. So activism is, I never thought to be an activist, though I hear that my books were full of, anyway, points, too much protest there. Increasingly for the last, say, 6 months, one, I am thinking broadly that it will be very, how to explain. I have been fighting against bondage of a system, and most consistent fight I did with help from Dr. Chobi Devi. Of course, I started earlier. I came to know of him later about this criminal crime persecution all over India. It's very little known. Most of the listeners will know nothing about it. So, officially, Act was passed. This practice was.
I just have an interesting question to both of you. How do you reconcile? How do you look at the celebrity status in combination with very much being the thorn? What is a celebrity thorn? No? And then we'll come back.
Well, should I?
Yeah.
Start? Yeah. Okay. Celebrity is an interesting word. For example, in the United States, Osama bin Laden is a celebrity. It's not difficult to reconcile that with the fact that he's regarded as a thorn. Distributed by the New York Times syndicate all over the world, and will appear all over the world, the political class, the media, and so on. So even though I'm naturally excluded from those circles almost entirely, I can't possibly begin to meet a fraction of the requests for speaking to public organizations, participating in their activities, helping organizing, and so on. So it's, yes, a celebrity of sorts, but I don't think it's difficult to reconcile with being a thorn in the sides of the powerful.
Because one writes some books, because those books are read and at times praised, one becomes a celebrity. So I just reject this celebrity status. How does one feel to be a celebrity? I don't know. If you say I am a celebrity, I feel much more comfortable with my tribals. They don't think of me as a celebrity. They think of me as a plain human being who comes to them. And I again repeat this. You see, hunger is the basic thing which needles me all the time. Because it will be atrocious, but I think that India became independent. This independence has totally failed. This I am finding increasingly as I live. This independence has failed because it has not kept all the promises given to the people.